So, welcome along to a very special Pixiecast. We have the opportunity to hear from the host himself, which means we're visiting Cullompton for the second time in this world tour. He burst onto our screens a few years back, such classics as The Wife's Gone to Tesco's and Live from a Waitrose supermarket car park. It's Andrew Barge.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Well, that went a bit. That wouldn't have been Alan Partridge.
Aha!
So how do you do it, Andrew? How do you kind of stay out of Partridge mode? Because
I don't know that I ever come out of Partridge mode, do I? I don't know really. I mean, I've been doing this kind of work for 20 odd years now for the BBC, albeit sports reporting and primarily commentating. So I guess I've just got used to talking to a camera, or not a camera necessarily, but talking into a microphone and not actually having someone necessarily sat there in front of me, having someone sat in front of me. So although obviously I can see your handsome face, I'm just sort of treating this as being like a football commentary, really. It's just talking gibberish and hoping that I provide some entertainment.
So you're obviously into the sport, but actually, is the commentary like a bigger thing for you? Like, so if you didn't have an interest in football,
yeah,
would you be commentating on something else?
Well, I love radio. I think radio is probably the best medium, more so than TV. And probably in lockdown, actually, I've been listening to a lot more radio, especially podcasts and that, which is where I got the idea for doing this. So yeah, probably most people will know on the group that I've got a disability. I was born with spina bifida, but as a young lad, I was always really into football. My dad was interested in football. Match of the day I was allowed to stay up late to watch Match of the Day and the big match on a Sunday afternoon on ITV. And because I couldn't really play football with my mates because it was a bit too rough, and my parents, although I could kick a ball around, and that my parents were worried that I was going to, get hurt and whatever, because my balance has never been my strong point, shall we say. That I just used to sit on the side of the wall and commentate on my mates and just give them the names of all the top players at the time. So we're sort of going back to the mid to late 70s, where I just sort of become a Liverpool fan way before I was an Exeter City fan, because Liverpool then were the top team. So I just used to commentate and just give my mates all the names of the top Liverpool players at the time and commentate on them. So I guess I've been doing it for 40 odd years, more than 40 years now. So yeah.
Liverpool. Did you go to university in Liverpool?
No, I went to sunny Bournemouth.
Right.
So, but I've got one of my best mates lives in Liverpool. So he's actually on this group, but he never interacts with it at all, because I sort of signed him up for it. But his dad was from Liverpool, and he used to take us up to Liverpool matches in the 80s. Sadly, he died about 20 years ago now. But he used to take us up to see Liverpool games in the mid 80s and that as well. And I've always sort of had an affinity with the city and that as well, because before or after the games, he used to take us to the pub and stuff like that and show us the haunts that he used to go to when he was a young lad living up there. And I suppose I've just sort of grown a love for the city. And of course, it's produced such wonderful people as John Lennon and Joe Kirkham and Helen Young, is it? Or no, what's her name? Owen, that's the one, isn't it? Yeah. Helen Owen, yeah. And different ones. So that's where it comes from, yeah.
I'd need to go there more, actually. I've been there once and had a great time, and it was a kind of stopover to going to Scotland. But
it's a great city, much
maligned. You can turn up to a place, can't you? And it feels like every other place. It has the same shops, but it didn't feel like that stopping in Liverpool.
No, they very much have their own sort of mentality and outlook on life, and I guess that's a historic thing with it being on the north coast as well, and obviously the influx of a lot of Irish people coming in through Liverpool, through the ports, and that used to be one of the largest, busiest ports in the world, Liverpool, but sadly the decline in the 80s, and that's taken a lot of that away. But there's still that sort of maritime history, and I think ports always have their own sort of identity anyway, don't they? In the UK, certainly, they have a different feel about them, I think, when you go and see a port, and Liverpool and the independence of the nature of the people, and that just makes it a really special city, I think.
Yeah, it reminds me of an ancestor of mine. He was like a socialist in Bristol down in the docks,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
he ended up moving to Liverpool, and I can see some similarities between the two.
And also, it's been much maligned as well in the media over the years, and that as well, the last sort of 30 years, and that particularly because it did go into a lot of social decline. There was an awful lot of unemployment there, and there was a feeling that without getting into the politics too much, certainly under Margaret Thatcher, that it was just sort of left to decline, and it was just full of loads of socialists, and they were never going to vote for the Conservative Party anyway, so why would they bother with them? You know, I mean, obviously, it's culturally, it's a massive city as well in terms of the fabric of this country, with the Beatles and, you know, different playwrights and that as well, and all types of different art that have come out, and the influence that it's had on this country, I think, is immense.
Yeah, it's just one of those places, isn't it, that it punches well above its weight.
Yeah, it does. It does, absolutely.
It's not a small place, but you know, there's some places dotted around the UK that just, you know, seem really like great hotspots for culture. And
yeah, I mean, Bristol is much the same as well. I mean, a city that you know a lot better than I do. I lived there for 5 years and worked there for 5 years, and Bristol does have a similar sort of feel to Liverpool and that as well. And Manchester, okay, not being a port, but also has that sort of feel of, you know, it's punching above its weight, and has a sort of a cockiness and an arrogance, but in a nice way about it, I think.
That's really like you and I.
Don't know what you're saying.
Okay, so one of the members, Saren, actually asked about your broadcasting career. If we could go back to that for a second.
That's very kind of her to call it a career, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not over yet, is it?
Could be after this.
So, I mean, she's interested in getting into broadcasting and radio, and I just wondered, like, how did you start? What age did you pick this up, or did you stumble into it, or how?
I mean, this is just one of those sort of terrible forms of nepotism, really. So I've got a mate who still works for the BBC called John Ayres. He works down here on the local regional news programme, but he's also a big Exeter City fan. And he's been doing commentaries for Radio Devon for at least 20 years, probably being more than that, about 30 odd years. But he also used to work in London for Capital Radio as well, where he used to do commentaries for Arsenal, Tottenham, West Ham, all the big sort of Premier League clubs. Then he moved to Birmingham, and he worked doing commentaries on Aston Villa and Birmingham City and other clubs around that area. And there was a time, so I've been doing them since 2000. There was a time then that they were, when they were doing football commentaries, they were using players who were either injured or had been dropped. And then they started asking for like silly amounts of money to do it. And the BBC just sort of said, sorry, we can't justify paying you that kind of money to do it, just to turn up and talk nonsense for 90 minutes. And I wasn't putting myself forward, but I said to John, why don't you get some fans together who, you know, can string a sentence together and won't be effing and blinding, and just sort of try that and see how it works. And didn't think anything more of it. And then about 6 months after that conversation, I suppose, he rang me up and said, did I fancy doing a game at Luton Town, Luton and Exeter? But unfortunately, it clashed with me going to a wedding. And so I thought that was it. I thought my chance had gone. But thankfully it hadn't. And then about 6 months later, towards the end of that season, they rang me up again. They needed somebody. And actually my first game was in Bristol. It was Bristol Rovers against Exeter City, which was a boring 0-0 draw at the Memorial Ground. And it's just sort of snowballed from there. So, I mean, for me, it's not because of talent or anything like that I got into it. It's simply because I had a mate, and I suppose I was a little bit cocky and said, when he offered me the chance, I said, yeah. But it's quite funny because when he did actually phone me up and say, do I fancy doing it? I was like, oh Christ, what have I done now? You know, I mean, part of me was like, yeah, I really, really want to do this. But I was shit scared, to be perfectly honest. He rang me up on the Thursday, I think it was, for the Saturday game. And I said, I'll give you an answer tomorrow, i.e. on the Friday. And so I rang off, and then I just thought, I've got to do this, but I've got to get my courage up to do it. So I just rang around a load of my mates and said, oh, you never guess what I've just been offered to do. Sort of, I suppose in the back of my mind, I knew that they would say, you've got to do this. You can't bottle out of it. And, you know, you have to do this because, you know, it is quite a big thing. And I still take a huge amount of pride in the fact that I've been doing it for 20 years. So I rang up a load of my mates and told them that I'd been offered it, knowing that I couldn't then sort of back out really. So I rang John back that night and said, yeah, of course I'll do it. But my first attempt was very cliche ridden, shall we say. They probably still are. But,
well, I mean, especially if your first game is a draw.
Yeah, 0-0 draw, no goals, nothing
I mean,
really.
how do you even begin to fill it without a few cliches?
Well, I know exactly.
You can't have dead time.
No, dead air is like the ultimate sin in radio. Yeah, you can't have dead air. Yeah, I know. I mean, there were cliches. I clearly remember it now. I even said about throwing the kitchen sink and stuff like that. Just like all those terrible sort of thing that Alan Partridge would say. I'm sure if I heard it back, I would really cringe at some of the stuff that I came out with. Game of two halves. Yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah, jumpers for goalposts and stuff like that. Yeah, men against boys. And
I think it's all over.
Yeah. So, and then for a few months, I didn't hear back from them because that was towards the end of the season. And then they had a regular guy, a former player who was doing all the home games anyway. So he had all those sewn up. And then after that, I just started getting a few away games. And then a couple of years later, he decided to pack it in because Exeter weren't doing very well. And he was fed up with commentating on crap football every other week. So I got the role of doing all the home games, and in one season I did 43 out of 46 games. So I was literally sort of traveling all over the country and doing pretty much every game. So yeah.
So many fans are just very familiar with your voice now, like the Pixie fans, actually.
Yeah, some of them probably feel they're too familiar with my voice, but yeah. So there we go. But I guess I'm doing something right. They keep asking me back, so I'm very cheap. That's what it is.
Oh, sure. But I think also a lot of the group would also appreciate the skills you bring to it now, because, you certainly bashed out, 50 plus Pixiecasts?
This is number 52. Not that I'm keeping a record or anything.
Yeah, well, you won't get paid for this one, Andrew. It doesn't work like that.
What? Now you tell me. Jesus, right, that's it, I'm off.
I'm waiting for the PayPal to ping, and then we can move on to the Pixies questions. So, why do the Pixies cast? I mean, there's lots of things you could do to
better use of my time.
Talk about Pixies. Yeah, I mean, you could have started painting the house and stuff, help Jordan out a bit more.
That was never going to happen. So lockdown, I guess, is sort of, as it has been for a lot of people, has been the sort of catalyst for just doing something a little bit different. So I don't think before lockdown I'd actually listened to a podcast at all. And then I do listen to a lot of radio, as I said, and they started advertising that Louis Theroux was starting to do some podcasts, interviewing people around lockdown and what they were doing, famous people. And I just started listening to those. And I really love Louis Theroux anyway. I love all his TV shows and his style and the sort of subject matter that he's been dealing with. So I just started listening to all those, and he did 10 of those. And he interviewed people like Boy George and Miriam Margolyes and different people like that. Some quite random people and that as well. Helena Bonham Carter was another one. Troy Deeney, who's just like, that was completely random. He's a footballer for Watford. Why he chose him, I don't really know. But I really, really enjoyed those. And then I think I posted about it actually on the group. And I think it might have been Jules Crowley, but I might be giving her undue credit. So sorry, Jules, if I am giving you undue credit. But somebody said, why don't you listen to the Adam Buxton ones? And I was aware of Adam Buxton, but I'd always kind of found him a little bit puerile and a little bit childish. So I thought, I've listened to all these 10 Louis Theroux ones, and I'm actually going back and listening to them again. So I just searched out the Adam Buxton ones, and at the time he'd done about 100 or so. He's up to about 130 now. And again, sort of, a lot of famous people, but some not so famous people that I'd sort of vaguely heard of. And I just really got into it. It's just sort of quite nice lying in bed. I go to bed with my radio on in my little, not these, but like little headphone sets, which drives Jordan mad. But I go to bed, and that's how I fall asleep
all the time.
Sorry?
It seems like every time I see you lately, you're wearing them. I mean, You're getting your money's worth, Andrew. I'll give you that.
I mean, I never would sleep if I went to sleep in these, but no, I have like the little, the iPhone ones. And I literally do go to bed listening to podcasts. And before I would have listened to the radio, but it was just getting so depressing listening about COVID and that all the
Yeah,
time.
you need to tune out a bit.
I just wanted something.
And I think the podcasts are, if someone isn't trying some of the podcasts, they're missing out on some really great stuff.
No, they are, definitely.
And then I usually end up following them on Twitter or something. But there's one, I'll just look it up actually. It was, because I listened to like a boxing one and that's great. But, even that, I just can't keep up because they're quite prolific. But there was another one, I've got it next to Louis Theroux actually, called How Do You Cope?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Really good.
Mm-hmm. And there's another one on BBC called Sound and Vision as well, which is all about film and the music that's played on the soundtracks of various films and that have sort of influenced, that have been influenced actors and that as well. So that's another good one to listen to on
well, definitely. I think you said on a few podcasts about a lot of the people you've interviewed and how cinematic the Pixies are, and where some things have directly related to a video like Gollum, but actually a lot of their music just fits a moment in a film really well.
Yeah, definitely. Which always surprised me that they didn't do videos until recently. They've sort of the last, 5 years or so, they've really got into video in a way that they hadn't done previously. And I guess an extent of that is probably money, budget, and that they didn't either want to spend the money and also maybe they just didn't feel like they were actors and didn't want to actually appear in their videos, which sometimes there's a pressure to do. But yeah, I mean, to me, their music is so evocative. It really does sort of conjure up images in your mind in a way that I can't think of any other band that I've really been into do that so frequently.
Yeah, certainly going by the album art. I mean, it's funny because where previously they hadn't done many videos, I still think of them as quite a visual band. Maybe the influence of Paz, perhaps.
Yeah, well, I think it's telling that. I think it's telling on the new single that she actually, I think she's the only one who appears in the video, and she directed the video, didn't she, for "Hear Me Out." So yeah, so maybe that's a direction that they will go in. But I don't know. I just sense that maybe they're just not really that interested in doing it. I don't know.
So where did your interest begin with the band?
So it goes back to John Peel, late 80s, 88 I think it was. And my mate, the one who I'd spoken about earlier on, the one who lives in Liverpool, Joe, he's always loved John Peel as much as I have. And he was probably more of a dedicated follower of him than I was at that stage. And he just told me, he said, "Oh, have you heard this band Pixies?" And so I went back and listened to it, and John Peel actually replayed that session. I think he played it a couple of times in quite chronological succession. And so I heard it there. So that would have been about 88, 89. And then I saw them at Glastonbury in 1989, which was the first time that I saw them. So it dates back to that. So it would have been Caribou, probably would have been the first. I don't really remember, but that was certainly the first song in that session their first session that they did for John Peel.
Yeah, I think being one of the first tracks on that album, I think like when people are introduced, it's usually one of those first tracks from an album that really resonates. And I forget how good Caribou is sometimes, just because it's not, it's an album I rate highly, but
and really popular as well on the Pixiecast that I've been doing. It's up there as one of the most popular.
So how easy do you find it to answer your own question about your favorite album or your favorite track?
Okay, so favorite album definitely is Doolittle, without a doubt. And I think you and I spoke about this, didn't we, when I was interviewing you? And we had that conversation about Silver, which I won't rehash, but I think Doolittle is pretty much a faultless album, really. There's just so many brilliant tracks on there. There really are. I could never grow tired of listening to Doolittle, I don't think.
No, and it almost feels like an easy answer because it is a famous album, and it's an album that really really shows them at their best. But it's still more than that for me. I don't know which bit particularly caught you.
I think one of the things I was thinking about earlier on with Pixies is that if you listen to all their albums, every single album starts with a really strong track. You know, there aren't any sort of weak openers, if you like, to sort of settle you in, and that they're all just like really in your face, powerful tracks that really sort of set the scene for the rest of the album. And so, and obviously with Doolittle, you've got Debaser, so you know, which could easily be my favourite track of Pixies. You know, I mean, it's certainly the one which I think sort of resonated with me very early on in those days, because like I said, I got into them 88, 89, so they'd almost sort of gone past Surfer Rosa at that stage and were sort of then going straight into Doolittle because they were releasing stuff so frequently. So I left Surfer Rosa and Come On Pilgrim behind a little bit as soon as I heard Doolittle, because as soon as I heard that, there was nothing else that I really wanted to listen to, and it was just constantly on in my car. I remember at home, and I had it on cassette, I had it on CD in the car when I finally got a car that had a CD player in it, and it was just, I was listening to very little else, certainly very little other bands at that stage.
Yeah, and maybe something to do with the shortness of it, because what is it, like 39 minutes or something? I mean, it just keeps flipping over and over. And
yeah, and if you skip Silver, it's even shorter.
Oh, you wouldn't. You're beyond that now, Andrew.
I am, yeah, okay.
There comes a time in a man's life where he just embraces all of it.
It's like I said to you, I think I said to you, I've probably said to other people doing these Pixiecasts, is in isolation, if I was just out in my car and suddenly Silver came on the radio, I would think, wow, this is a brilliant track. Because their worst is better than most other bands, even bands that I love, I would say. But for me, it's just not quite up to the same standard as the rest of that album. But others will disagree, and that's fine. They're wrong.
I have almost like a blind faith. I mean, I would be honest about it if I didn't like something, but there are other artists that I absolutely love, yet I don't always have their latest album. You know, I was downloading the Pixies Beneath the Eyrie as soon as the thing arrived online.
I remember. Well, that was the weekend that you came and stayed with us, wasn't it?
Yeah, I can't imagine that changing. Not the weekend, but you know, that eagerness to have the album straight away.
Absolutely. I mean, another band that I love, and probably they precede Pixies in terms of bands that I really love, is Echo and the Bunnymen as well. But there are several of their albums which I don't own, and I've no real desire to download or buy. But yeah, I mean, Pixies, I've got every single album of theirs, and like you say, and I was like that as well with REM as well. REM were massive for me, and I still miss them today, because again, I always felt like REM, even if it was substandard, it was still better than most other stuff that you were going to hear that on the radio as well.
It took me a while with REM, because when they were doing Monster and the albums surrounding that, they were so popular, and I couldn't see it, and maybe I don't know, maybe I didn't want to be with it because it was just so big. But later on, when they did, I think it was it Up?
Yes. Yeah.
That album just really grabbed me, and then I did that kind of Pixies thing where I ended up collecting all the albums and really rate them. But kind of they'd had their day by then. I guess rather like the Pixies. Yeah,
I mean they clearly decided at one stage that they were going to go for the money. This is REM, around Losing My Religion, and moving from our IRS to Warner Brothers, which is clearly there are different expectations when you leave a small label and go to a massive label like Warner Brothers. So they went off in a different direction, but to me they were still always edgy and still always original, and were never really pop music apart from Losing My Religion, which obviously was the single that made them massive. But yeah, I mean, I never felt like they put out a bad album. Some of them weren't as good as others, but like I say, I think Michael Stipe is up there with Charles as just being a phenomenal frontman and a phenomenal can't speak
Yeah, it's
songwriter.
easy. Yeah.
It's easy when you're interviewing.
This is why you haven't sold out, really, isn't it? You've seen what happened to Michael Stipe, and you just kept it real.
Absolutely.
Stay in Exeter.
Yeah,
Keeping
my feet grounded. Sorry.
What's the difference then? Why have you gone so far and so deep in the Pixies, but Echo and the Bunnymen? I don't see you doing Echo and the Bunnymen podcasts or joining the groups, or
maybe you're just not on those groups. I don't
know. No, well, Jordan
will. So going back to the podcast, the reason that I wanted to do it, again, partly lockdown, just having some time on my hands, being stuck at home. You don't have to daily commute, you don't have to get up and iron a shirt, and you don't have to really worry about, you don't even have to shower if you don't want to, unless Jordan tells me that I have to after 5 days, So I got this idea. I mean, I've had various harebrained ideas over lockdown, as I'm sure lots of other people did, and have done, some of which have come to fruition and some which still haven't. And so I just messaged Pixie, just out of courtesy as much as anything. And I said, look, I've got this idea for doing a podcast. How do you feel about it? Oh, and by the way, if you say yes, will you be my first guest? So thankfully, bless her, she replied and said, yeah, I think it's a great idea. And I honestly thought I might do 3 or 4, something like that. But I've just been delighted with the way that it's sort of taken off, and people have been so willing to give up their time and to spend time talking to me about the band that we all love so much, and also to find out a little bit about their lives and that as well, because we're all living strange lives at the moment, and we all have different lives, living in different countries and different traditions, and different stresses and that sort of thing, and stories to tell. And I just thought I'd give it a go and see how it worked out.
Yeah, I can see, and certainly with Pixie White, it wasn't just a Pixiecast, was it? Like, she reacted in a similar way to create the storytelling group, which must have helped a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And you've taken the Pixiecast thing and run with that. And I know Jordan was speaking earlier about just like fostering that love of plants, and I think people have found something, and that's a healthy thing. It's worked out really well, and certainly there's a lot of joy come from people viewing your Pixiecasts.
Yeah, and that's lovely, and I've genuinely enjoyed doing every single one of them that I've done. And some of the people have come forward, I haven't known who they are. Some I've approached myself because I think they had a story to tell, and they hadn't necessarily volunteered when I first put the post up in the 2 groups about asking for volunteers. So there are a few people who I did actually approach and say, would you do, I think I approached you as well, because you hadn't volunteered. So
no, I'm not
to speak to you. But then, people like Jeremy Macumber Dubs and that as well, who clearly has a big story to tell in Pixies, different ones, and people who I've just made friends with and that. So people like Helen Owen, I'll get her name right, who wouldn't have naturally volunteered to do one, but I did contact her and say, I'd really love you to do one with me, and Kelly Loney and that as well. So there are different people, and some who needed a bit more encouragement, shall we say. So yeah, it was a combination. I mean, I was amazed. I think when I first put out the post, there was about 30 odd people that came forward and said, yeah, I'll do one. And there's still quite a few that you do want to do it, but we're probably now going to do those in the new year, get Christmas and New Year out of the way, and then we'll record a few more. But I think one of the really lovely things that I've had feedback from people, and this is just sort of privately between me and whoever I've spoken to, is that people have said things like, thank you for taking me out of my comfort zone. I never would have done that kind of thing. I mean, Helen Owen, bless her, had to get pissed before she'd start speaking to me. I mean, I was talking to her for about an hour before we pressed the record button. Slight exaggeration, Helen, but I mean, and that is just so gratifying to think that I've just done something to just sort of tweak something in another person that they've suddenly got the confidence to do some public speaking, and because you are making yourself vulnerable when you do this kind of thing. I appreciate that. And I mean, I feel a little bit vulnerable now because I'm on the receiving end of doing it. So, and there's certainly a lot more adrenaline pumping through me at the moment than there ever is doing a football match or me interviewing you, for example. So I understand that it's not easy for people. And so I do really appreciate that people, when it wasn't natural for them, that they've come forward and said that they would do it. So, yeah. It's
It is a big deal, because whilst you're talking to a screen and, and it goes back to that thing about being online again, doesn't it? People always talk about it not being real. It's real because somebody's feeling something at the other end of it. And including any anxiety about coming on and doing it.
Yeah.
I think it was Kate who talked about, like, how things like that can affect you, albeit she was talking about meeting Charles.
Yeah.
But, that kind of tension and the crippling diarrhea and all the things.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You're not feeling any of that stuff when you're commentating football these days?
No, not these days. I mean, I used to. First sort of 2-3 years, because I was doing it so infrequently, and I think that's part of it, is that I wasn't practicing it enough. Whereas now I do it pretty much during the season, at least once a fortnight, if not more. And I've been so fortunate. I've commentated at Wembley twice, and I've commentated all around the country. I've interviewed various football managers, and done stuff that I never would have imagined I could have done. As I say, as a disabled lad, just sitting on the wall commentating on my mates. I never once imagined that it would actually lead on to me commentating on the two teams that I've supported in my life, Liverpool and then Exeter City, and actually commentating on an FA Cup match between Liverpool and Exeter City as well. I mean, that was for me, that was massive. And I think it's why I still enjoy doing it now.
Yeah, and not only that, is, if you can do something that you enjoy doing, especially if it's surrounding something you love, like a hobby or an interest, well, that's got to be a good way to spend your time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's no money in it. You don't make any money out of local radio at all. I mean, it's appalling.
All the backhanders, Andrew, and all the little...
No brown envelopes, I'm afraid. No.
Just leave something on your chair.
Hey?
Just leave something on your chair. Don't open it till you go back to the car.
Mate, sometimes you're lucky if you get a cup of tea at some of these places that you go to. Actually, one of the good things at the moment in lockdown is when I'm doing games at Exeter City, because there are no crowds and that at the moment, obviously because of COVID, is that we actually get to sit in the directors' seats. So we've got nice cushioned seats, and somebody comes out at half time and gives us a cup of tea or coffee and a flapjack or something like that. So yeah, so happy days. Sometimes literally, I mean, you can travel. I remember once I went up to Carlisle for a night game with 4 of us in a car, up and back in a day to Carlisle, which you're virtually in Scotland. You're a lot nearer to Peter Norris than you are nearer to my house when you're in Carlisle. And we literally got a cup of tea, and it's 6 hours there, 6 hours back, something like that. And this is for a night game. So we got home at about 5 in the morning, having left at about 8 the following morning. So yeah, I mean, it's not sexy.
Carlisle invoiced you for that?
Yeah, they wanted me to pay for going up there. Yeah. So no, local radio is not a place to be if you want to make money, but it's great fun.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to bring you back to that album then. So I'm guessing by choosing Doolittle that it's going to be a track from Doolittle.
What, my favourite track?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
No, I know. I was thinking about this, and I'm sure most people, if they've been listening, will probably think I'm going to go for Valoria, but I'm not going to go for Valoria either. I'm actually going to go for one off Beneath the Eyrie, and it goes back to that point that I made about their opening tracks on the albums just being really, really powerful.
Okay.
So I've given away what it is. It's In the Arms of Mrs. Mark of Cain. And actually a little story that I will tell you about this, which does involve you, although you wouldn't have known this at the time. But I think the album did actually come out the day before the Plymouth gig, is that right? Or 2 days before?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, and I clearly remember you came and stayed with us overnight, and Jordan came down to Plymouth, and I downloaded it and I was playing it in my car. And it's just that opening minute or so of that track is just so powerful. And I just think great driving music, if you like. I'm going back to that Alan Partridge thing now, and I don't wear driving gloves. But sort of it's just got that sort of power behind it, and that driving drumming of Dave Lovering's and Joey's guitar, of course, and the bass. And I just love some of the lyrics from that song as well. So a little bit left field maybe, but I'm going to go for In the Arms of Mrs. Mark of Cain.
Yeah, it's a great track, and it has that kind of like 1970s spy sound, doesn't it? You know, which they do replicate. I think it maybe, I might be wrong in saying this, but in the podcast they were talking about, like, you know, can we do this live? But it was such a great sound.
Mm-hmm.
And
again, one of those sort of cinematic songs as well, isn't it?
Yeah. It should have Michael Caine in it. It's that kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
I forget the name of the Michael Caine movie. Is it Ipcress File? It's something like that.
The Ipcress File, yeah, that was one of them.
But there's something that sounds very similar to it, but it feels.
Or even it could be like a James Bond theme or something like that. You know, it's got that sort of
John Barry stuff.
Yeah.
Lalo Schifrin, all that, like, really, you know, when music in movies was really, really good.
And that's one of the things, going back to that podcast that you would probably like as well, the Sound and Vision one, is that's what they talk about in this podcast, about the marriage of the film, the cinematic and the music, and why they're so important and why they work so well together. And actually, one that I was listening to this morning, actually, they were talking about Where Is My Mind being used in Fight Club, and that end sequence in Fight Club, and how that song just marries so well with the end sequence of Fight Club. Yeah,
it's almost like the movie was made for the song.
Yeah.
That's how good the fit is.
Yeah, I forget the name of is it Sam Taylor? I forget her name now. She did We Need to Talk About Kevin. But she was this director who was talking about why she loved that Pixies track so much, because of how it fits with the closing sequence in Fight Club.
Yeah, I feel the same. In fact, I think I've said before that I'm more of a movie fan than a music fan. But certainly when I was working as a teacher, like if we did productions in school, it would be based around the music, and whatever the children did would link in with it. And it's very satisfying to use music in that way. I think it can really elevate things and make people feel things more than what they're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, definitely.
That's a very visual song, as is the one you mentioned previously, Debaser. They sound great, but they look great too, those tracks.
Yeah.
Okay, that's nice to hear you choose a track from the new album, because it's very easy to overlook the new stuff, but that was a cracking album.
Yeah, it is. And I was just in such a good mood, I think, driving down there as well. And you got this thumping opening, and like I say, of that song.
You kicking the back of your seat.
Yeah, you kicking the back of my seat in time. Yeah. And and also it's the first time that Jordan and I had been to see Pixies and that together, and we were going down to meet friends and people who we hadn't met before, like the Steeleys and Michelle and different ones and that as well. And it was just that was just such a great weekend. And I just remember that clearly, going down the A38 with that belting out.
Oh, that is a partridge. You've just dropped the accidental partridge right in there. Yeah. Tearing down
the Devon Freeway, I think is, the Devon Expressway. I must get it right, because it's not on motorway. It's only an A road. Okay,
so obviously you're really comfortable with the new stuff with the Pixies. So how did you make an adjustment, like being a long-term fan, if you were into them at 89? How did you make the adjustment into the solo stuff?
So when they split up, I remember I was gutted, really, really gutted. I was at university, pre-internet days, and used to buy the NME and the Melody Maker every week, like people in my age would have been doing at that stage. And I just remember seeing it in I think it was reported in both of those weekly music papers. And I was absolutely gutted about it. I really was. Obviously, Kim had started doing some stuff with Breeders, and I liked that, so I was buying that. And then just wasn't sure really. I thought, oh well, that's it then. That's the end of Pixies. So I can't even remember who else I would have been listening to at that time. I know I really liked Belly at that time, which they obviously have a close connection with Pixies and that as well. And Star by Belly, that album was a constant one in my record playing, CD playing, if you like. And there was this funny joke about me actually at college that I would joke that if a group wasn't signed to 4AD, that I wasn't interested in them. So, and this just was like a recurring theme. So I suppose I sort of started getting into all the other sort of 4AD groups like Cocteau Twins and Lush and different ones and bands that were on that label. Aphex Twin and Wolfhound Gang and all those different bands and that, but none of them sort of resonated with me in the same way that Pixies had done. But then thankfully, because Charles is just so prolific, it wasn't long before he started coming out with his own new stuff. And of course, we had Frank Black and Teenager of the Year, which, I mean, those two both stand up to anything that Pixies have done as well, I think, really. I mean, they're just brilliant albums.
Yeah. Certainly after I selected my tracks, I could have easily gone back and changed it.
Yeah.
I think I picked 10%er, but I mean, there's some other tracks on that album that are great.
I look back what you chose, yeah. The Swimmer, 10%er, and I Bleed.
Yeah, The Swimmer's never going to change for me because I just think that's a great album. But are you suggesting then that you know, with the solo stuff, it's going to be between the eponymous album and the Teenager?
Yeah, because as everyone knows, I've got a bit of a problem with the Cult of Ray anyway. So, although I have started listening to it a bit more recently, but yeah, certainly. I mean, there are just so many brilliant tracks on both those first two Frank Black albums. That, I mean, I could happily pick any of them really.
I nearly picked a Cult of Ray track, but out of respect for you, I just left it alone. But I don't want to hurt you.
Because you were only the second one as well. I mean, it could have all come crashing down so quickly.
Yeah. I didn't want to. We wanted to get this thing going really before it got pulled from YouTube. But I think if you can print off that cover that someone designed for you and get into Cult of Ray, there are some stunning tracks on there. I Don't Want to Hurt You has some of the best lyrics. I
thought you were going to say something cutting about me then. Sorry, when you said I don't want to hurt you.
No, I'm trying to encourage you. I'm empowering you to get past the clip art.
Yeah.
And look into some of the Last Stand. You know, that was a very sad story, and that was a song that really grew. And I Don't Want to Hurt You has the kind of the heart is just a muscle in a cavity, which I think, if he never wrote another line, that's a great line.
Yeah. And there are so many great lines on there in his work and that as well. And I think they're always like little highlights in all of their tracks, which I just sort of like cling on to, and I'm waiting for them to come along when I'm listening to them. Yeah. Just going back to In the Arms of Mrs. Mark of Cain. I just love that bit where he says, "No, I'm not underfoot," and then Paz comes in and says, "I've been trying to explain." It's just something about the way that she says that. I'm always waiting for it in that track, and I find that in so many of their in their songs, whether it's just a lyric or a piece of Joey's guitar or some drumming or whatever, that they're always just like those little golden nuggets, if you like, in all of their tracks.
They feel genuine, don't they? They feel I don't know what you'd call it, but I recognise what you're describing. It is like there's little road signs and they come up to you, but when you get there, you have the feeling that it's a lived experience. It feels very natural what they're saying.
Yeah.
So which track is it then, Andrew?
Well, again, I'm going to go completely left field, but it's off Teenager of the Year, and this is going back to my mate in Liverpool, and I don't know why, but we always just used to sort of sing this song in the cars if we were going to football matches together or whatever. And there was just something that sort of bound us together, but it's in a sort of a jokey little way, but it's so Rockaby. And I think it's just the way that we used to sort of sing it in a terrible kind of American accent. So I apologize to everyone in America. And I won't do it now, but yeah, so we used to sing that in a sort of broad, terrible sort of mock American accent. So Rockaby.
I think you have to sing it in the accent, don't you?
I think it's just the way that he says "rockin' I am." I just love that. Again, it's just like one of those, just 2 words or 3 words in that.
Yeah, playful.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so Rockaby. But again, I could have chosen any of them.
Okay, so we'll let you put those into your spreadsheet when the podcast is done. So recently you interviewed Jordan, and that was
my wife.
That's
an Adam Buxton thing, by the way.
That was nice to see as well, and it made me laugh a lot. And I was just wondering, because I know other people have talked about kind of distance relationships and how the internet works. I mean, how does a humble lad from Exeter or wherever you were at the time, meet an Aussie chick?
So we met over there. I was over visiting other friends in Adelaide, and we were both at the same party, or Barbie as it was. And we just sort of got chatting, and because of modern technology, we were able to sort of stay in touch. Which obviously just there was a connection there between us, and through text, email, Skype, all that sort of stuff. It's still not easy, but it's a lot easier than it ever would have been, writing letters and taking 3 weeks to get there.
What year was that?
What year?
Yeah.
So oh god, you put me on the spot now. If I get this wrong, I'm going to be in trouble.
She won't be checking.
She won't watch it. No, that's fine.
Just roughly 2 or 3 years. Narrow it down.
I think we've just had our 11th anniversary of knowing each other. So I'm going to say 2009.
So not too bad then, technology-wise. I mean, it's not easy to have a long-distance relationship, but technology-wise, there are things you could use.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the biggest killer was the time difference. So, she'd be getting up as I was going to bed and vice versa. So it was just sort of conversations at the start of my day, the end of her day, and vice versa. And some of those sort of seeped into staying up late at night, later than either of us probably should have been, and having to get up and go to work and stuff like that. But that's one of the things that you put into a relationship, isn't it? Whatever the footing is, that you put in that additional effort because it's important to you and it's something that you want to sort of to work out. So so we both had a lot of late nights and early mornings doing that sort of stuff, but eventually it all worked out and I got her over here.
So how did you move from that stage to where you are now? Like I've seen a lot of rom-coms. Did you sort of sprint through the boarding gate? And
well, as you know, I wasn't born for sprinting. No, so we chatted for 2-3 years, something like that. And I guess, it just seems a long time ago now, but I think we sort of had that conversation as to where is this going? We both clearly had a deep affection for each other. And so I said, right, well, I'll come over and see you again and spend time with you, just to see if it was something sort of, that could sustain over the years. And so I went over there. I didn't stay with her or anything like that. I booked myself into a hotel in Adelaide, opposite the train station. Nice Mercure one, very cheap hotels actually in Australia.
Andrew, so I'm just going to stop you there. Like that is, don't tell me whether they had like little sachets of Nescafe on the fit. I want to know the romantic.
I took my own plate, so I got a bigger breakfast in the morning.
Cracking breakfast. I mean, they put little mint on the pillow. Andrew, focus.
Sorry. And I didn't do that. I'm a Partridge thing of dialing down and say, can you make one come on my TV for me, please? So yeah, so she was. I mean, she was working, so I didn't see a lot of her. So a lot of that time that I spent over there, I was just out doing all those sort of touristy things and that, and by myself and whatever. And then we had a few days together, and it was apparent that it was a lot deeper than just a long distance email Skype sort of relationship. So so it just sort of went on from there really. And then she came back and came and stayed with us, my family. So I introduced her to my family over a Christmas period, and then I went back there and met her family and did all that sort of thing, did the engagement thing, and then eventually she came over. It'll be 6 years ago in next February. It'll be 6 years that she's been over, and we just celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary.
And she's recently received citizenship as well, hasn't she?
No. So she's going through her indefinite leave to remain, which I mean, I don't really want to get started on the whole immigration process, because to me it's just a way of making money and trying to keep.
She's managed to pass that test, whereas you and I probably.
Yeah. So she. One of the things you have to do is a citizens test. I won't have got the name right, but basically they test your knowledge on customs and things like that within the UK. So. And some of them I didn't know the answer to, but I think she passed it with flying colours. I think it's quite weird. There are 24 questions. Why they choose 24, I've no idea. And you have to get 80%, I think, to pass it. You can keep retaking it, but it's like 50 quid a shot every time you retake it. So it's not like you only get one go, but you want to get it right first time, and she did. So yeah. So now we just have to wait. We've put all our applications in, all our paperwork, and hopefully now she'll get indefinite leave to remain.
And she's got a good accent as well. She can really.
She's got a better English accent than I do. Certainly a better Devonian accent than I do.
But has she picked up all those like small mannerisms? Like, so for example, if she was leaving, if time was getting on and she'd been visiting someone and it was time to leave, would she slap her thigh and say right?
Right.
Which means to American friends, it's like that means I'm off now.
Yeah.
It's the politest way I can think of to leave.
Yeah. And normally with English people, it means I should have left 10 minutes ago, but I was far too polite to have done anything about it. I don't know actually if she does do that. I'm sure she probably has picked up some of these.
It's an English eccentricities. Isn't it? You know the ones who really studied.
Yeah. But she's certainly, when she goes back to Adelaide, people can't believe that she's actually Australian. So, they say, oh, where are you from? What part of England are you from? And she said, well, actually, I was born here. I was born in Adelaide. So, yeah. But she does a very good act. A very, very good convincing act of being English, bless her. Apart from if you ask her to say fruit or Subaru. Subaru fruit, yeah. And then she'll whack me if I take the piss, which I frequently do.
So the first time I almost met Jordan,
it's
quite embarrassing probably, but I was with John Cole, and we were all and we were devastated probably, but we were in such a terrible mess that we couldn't see both. But you
really?
Understanding.
I don't remember that, because I only remember the first time that I met you. Yes, we were meant to have met, weren't we? Had you? Was that the way where I can't speak? It's terrible. The weekend of his daughter's wedding. Was it that weekend or?
No, I mean I actually went to that wedding.
Yeah, I know you did. Yeah. I'd forgotten that there was a previous time that we tried to meet up.
Yeah, so it was Father's Day, and we'd gone down to Brixham, so it was.
Oh yes, yeah. When you stood me up, I remember now. Yeah.
When we went out, it was just a step down onto the boat, and then we went out sailing, and there were lots of drinks and music and things. And then when we came back in, there's like 30 feet ladder up to the
to dry land.
Up to dry land, yeah, and I really mean dry land. So all these boats kind of tied together, and we just got caught there, stranded, if you will, and we had to drink our way out of it.
Poor thing.
But there's no way we could have got up that ladder to see you. in any kind of state.
Well, I think I was actually meant to have been on the boat as well. John was going to get me onto the boat one way or another, but I think maybe I was running a little bit late. But I think you had already departed by the time I got down there. So
Well,
I was just there sitting on the dock of the bay, waving at you and trying to phone you, and you just ignored me.
I think you're being very.
I'll put it down to John.
You're being a gentleman there. I mean, it was Phil, John, and I, and we let you down badly because we were.
I could hear the music.
We were not ship shape. Yeah.
Because I don't even think that you'd sort of set sail at that point either. I think you were just pretty much just in the dock, weren't you? Ignoring your mobile phones.
We had been out, but I think what I didn't quite understand at the time was that you don't just have the sailing and then you come back and get off. Actually, the party kind of starts when they get back, and I mean, it was all for charity.
Oh well, that's okay. That reassures me. That's something. It's probably just as well that I missed it. Yeah, well, you can't recreate these things, though, can you, Adam?
I can't remember these things. Let them recreate it.
But hey, at least it was only Brixham, which for me is only about 20 miles, so it's not too bad.
Yeah, and I think you met him shortly afterwards anyway, didn't you? Which was the very famous meeting.
Induced a heart attack, yeah, bless him. Yeah.
Okay, so that leaves us really with the Catholics albums.
Okay, yeah.
So to segue into this, I think we need to get off the subject of Brixham.
Yeah, okay. So it's still a work in progress, definitely. And it is going to be, and I've made a note of this, and it is one. Actually, this is one that people have already chosen. And it's open. Sorry, got my spreadsheet open. Open. The spreadsheet is open, and it is going to be St. Francis Dam Disaster. So
I don't think you're the only person that's chosen that.
No, it's been chosen before. Yeah. So I like that one. I think they've got a good future, that band. Play decent tunes.
I haven't heard anything from them for ages.
No, they do decent tunes. You can understand what they're saying. None of these bad language, none of these bad words and things.
Yeah.
Not that I've discovered yet, anyway.
The volume's good, isn't it? None of this sort of quiet stuff,
Yeah. Sort of music you could play to your mum and dad.
Yeah, mostly. I mean, that's a very good album.
I'll take your word for it, yeah.
So I mean, obviously I have been... You're not so familiar with the album yet.
Well, no, I'm not. I mean, obviously I've been listening to these tracks as people have been choosing them, and when I do the YouTube, putting them up on YouTube and things like that. So I am slowly getting into it, but I haven't listened to all the albums from start to finish, no.
I think that's an easy album to like, and certainly that's a great track to choose.
Yeah.
I certainly like it a lot.
Well, if you like it, Adam, then, I mean, a man of your impeccable taste.
Well, yeah, of course, but, the Show Me Your Tears, Pistol, there's some really good albums that maybe don't get mentioned as much, but Dog in the Sand is particularly good.
That seems to be the popular one amongst a lot of people. So that is where I will start when I eventually get to indulging myself with Catholics. Okay, so one of the things you've done to each and every person you've interviewed is to kind of bombard them with this question that you set for me. But I didn't set it. Thank you.
Joe said it, didn't she?
It was Joe Kirkham, who's clearly been having inappropriate dreams.
So it only feels right to bounce it back to you and have to say, you're on the stage, you're completely naked, and you've got to perform a Pixies song. However, I'm going to sort of alter it a little bit for you just to make it more uncomfortable.
Oh, thanks.
You get to pick 3 people to join you, and I'm not one of them.
You're not one of them.
No.
Right. Okay. That's...
But I will help. I will help your sort of support band up onto stage. So
And
this
are
is the naked
they all
Pixies.
naked as well? Are they the
They're all
three
naked
people?
too.
Oh,
So, you know,
that's terrible. Now, if I say anything inappropriate, Jordan's going to think, "Oh, right, why do you want to see them naked then?"
well, stick right there with you.
That's a good idea. Okay. All right. So Right. So I've always joked, and people have actually sort of raised this as being a possible, but actually I haven't chosen it, and that's gigantic. So why not? I will go for gigantic,
You said,
and take all the innuendo out of it, or whatever. So I will go for gigantic. And who would I want on stage with me? Oh, that's a great question. Well, I'd have to have my wife holding my hand. So Jordan would be one of them. Simply because I think he would detract from my embarrassment, because I think he would be absolutely hilarious. I'm going to go for Claes Leon in Sweden, because I just think he would be hysterical on
he's a
stage
very
naked.
funny man.
He is a very funny man.
He feels with silences for you.
Absolutely. And a fourth person, simply because the man is a complete legend, I'm going to have to go for Mike Flynn, and because I've missed out on meeting him before. So when I meet him, I want it to be a really special occasion. So I'd have to go for Mike Flynn Jr.
That sounds special. Well, that's three guys and a girl. That sounds like the Naked Pixies tribute band to me.
But that's me being very diplomatic as well, and not choosing any women, and my wife wondering why I chose that particular woman.
No, well, we'll leave that for Coley.
Yeah, quite.
The diplomat of the group. Well, Andrew, it's been really nice to speak to you and dip into your love of Pixies, as well as, you know, some of your own background. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us that you thought I might ask, but you've been burning to tell people?
No, not really. I thought you might have had some even more sort of challenging questions, actually. So thank you for.
Well, we can
that.
go into your childhood if you like, and
So no, there's not.
Way.
It's just a massive thank you, really, to everyone who've been so generous with their time and so open and honest. And like I was saying earlier on, I realise that for a lot of people, this is taking them out of their comfort zone. And if that's been a positive experience for them, then I'm absolutely delighted. I mean, it's just been great. It's been a way for us to all get to know each other a little bit better than perhaps we had done previously, and to bring people back together as well. You know, people who have already met. I mean, like talking to you now. Obviously, I've not seen you during lockdown physically and that, but it's just been great to spend time with people. So no, I'm just really very grateful for it, and they will continue. So if there's anyone out there who hasn't volunteered for one and wants to do one, then just give me a shout. Just drop me a message in Messenger, and we'll fix it up. I've recorded a couple of special ones and that as well, so they'll be coming up in the next few weeks. So yeah, so they're not all over, but maybe not quite as prolific as I have been in the last sort of 6-7 weeks. And
yeah, I mean, I kept up at first. I think the first 15 to 20, I was on it, but as life got busier, I've fallen behind a bit. But
so Helen Owen can relax a little bit now. She's got a bit of time to catch up on them. So
yeah, I will watch every single one at some point. But
I was getting a little bit paranoid. Well, not paranoid, but a bit anxious about it, because I was like, I've got to put one out every day. I've got to put one out every day. And it started off quite slowly, and so I didn't have that many. And then I got backed up. I had about 10 that I could just put out. And then obviously they've started to slow down in terms of people who've wanted to do them. And like I say, some people have said that they'll do them next year and what have you, for various different reasons. So yeah, so it's sort of been, it's been quite interesting, really, in sort of keeping it going. But I'm delighted to have got to 50 plus. So yeah, and like I say, happy to do many more if people want.
Yeah, well, if someone hasn't and they're thinking of doing it, I would encourage them to do it, because, like I didn't volunteer to do one. I mean,
No, I press on you.
You harassed me,
yeah.
But actually, I think
I plumbed you.
Yeah, I received a plumbing online.
Ooh, matron.
Here we go.
That's what she said.
think, yeah, I think especially for those who've been locked down and are stuck in home. I think of one or two in particular, but to have something to have a conversation with you and connect, and maybe for somebody who's feeling more shy to just be seen and heard, and and I think it's been really useful. And the bottom line is actually, without analysing it too much, I think it's just a lot of fun to hear someone speak when you're just used to reading a comment, or you haven't actually had the pleasure of meeting them in real life.
Absolutely.
It's been a really good thing. So
thank you. Yeah.
For that, thank you very much.
Thank you, mate. Great to see you again.
Okay.
Cheers. You know I'm not going to post this, don't you?
Yeah.
Cheers, mate. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.